my name is Jessie Dolliver. I'm a botany student and I was shadowing Professor Odeline Leiser at the conference. I really appreciate the opportunity to question, do we now know the future of life? However, I did have an existential crisis in preparing this. Because I still can't get past the first question, what is life? Especially when I think about endosymbionts and artificial intelligence and viruses. I fall into this philosophical, ontological question of being. What is life? Is it a real object? Is it a thing? Or in the process of trying to define it, are we also in a process of reification? That is, making something concrete out of something which is actually an abstraction. I don't really know the answer. The first line of the first plant sciences textbook I ever had said, "Plants, a lot like love, are easier to recognize than they are to define." And I was like, great. But I think you could say the same thing about life. In order to prevent myself from going crazy, I conceptualize life as all those things containing replicable DNA molecules, which is huge. And as was mentioned in the conference, there's an estimated 9 million eukaryotic organisms, the vast majority of which we haven't identified and probably never will. The point which I'm getting at here, and would like to focus on for the rest of the talk, is that for a conference on all of life, us humans had a little bit of a disproportionate representation. I'm not just complaining. However, in the question of the future of life, us humans have got a disproportionate degree of influence. So it's a bit of an unfortunate fact, but it's true that we have a lot of control over the future of life. Any scientist in geology, geography, or the natural sciences has had a conversation about the Anthropocene in recent years. We have fundamentally altered our planet so much that we have potentially created a new geological epoch, and in doing so have permanently altered the trajectory of all of life on Earth into the future. Andrew's example of the bat extinction is one in thousands of documented cases of this. So despite humans and their importance, blah, blah, it was great to hear Professor Leiser talk about the future of plants. Her research on the plastic development of plants and the different signals plant meristems receive in order to determine branching and organ identity is so fascinating, but it's also so important, especially in agriculture and the future of food security going into the next century. We needed to think about these questions. But in a kind of more fundamental and basic way, as Professor Leiser said in her talk, the kingdom of the plants and their photosynthetic microbial relatives are so much more than that. They're the entry into life, this negative entropy that we're talking about, this free energy, this decay into atomic chaos, as Schrödinger said himself. The plants provide all the other life, this entry point. Professor Leiser also talked about networks, which we've been talking about. It's a bit of a theme for the conference. And how we have a very good, well-developed framework of thinking about parts in physics and in biology, but a better understanding of dynamic behaviors between parts. So in a network, your node would be the parts, and your edge would be the dynamic behaviors. She noted that there are these network motifs that recur, a phenomenon of these networks that pop up in all contexts and scales. And she's thinking that if we can better identify these network motifs and characterize the behaviors between them, this is like a fundamental stepping stone into kind of having a more holistic, joined up consideration of what we know to be life. And I think this is kind of an important thought for us to have, not just in our study of life, but in the way we consider ourselves to interact with the rest of life. John Muir said, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it bound fast by 1,000 invisible cords to everything else in the universe. And that rings true to me, not only for any one field of study in science, but also for any one organism. So when I come back to this question of, do we now know the future of life? I would say not even close. Not even close. One thing that we can know, or that we can come closest to knowing, is our own response to life in the future. Right? We've got this huge influence, and so if we can change the way that we study and conceptualize life to be more true, then we will also be changing the future of life. The end of Erwin Schrödinger's little book, What is Life, he included a section on free will and determinism, in which he reconciles the physics and the laws of physics of nature and with the possibility of free will. And he does this on two premises. One, my body operates as a direct mechanism of the laws of nature. And two, Yet I know, by incontrovertible direct evidence, that I'm directing its motions, of their effects which I foresee, which may be all important, in which case I feel and take direct responsibility. So I think that kind of definition of free will is something worth bearing in mind when we consider the future of life, and what we can or can't do to protect it. Thank you.